Our marquee matchup of the week features number 4 Texas taking on that team up north. Quinn Ewers' words, not mine, as they get a week 2 showdown at the Big House. Number 9 Michigan trying to prove they can be competitive without Jim Harbaugh and J.J. McCarthy. Texas looking to prove that they are back. The two have only met once before, so this will be just the second meeting set to kick off Saturday at noon. On the matchup, let's bring in the host of Josh Pate's college football show, none other than Josh Pate. Josh, last year we got a Texas-Alabama matchup that almost saw the Horns pull out an upset in week 2. This year with Michigan, in theory, as Michigan being the defending national champ, we're in for a treat. But based on what you've seen out of both of these teams in week 1, what are you actually expecting?
Well, that's a great question. So we've seen in history, not just like the last few years, but history of college football, the team that has a lot expected of it that looks bad in week 1 tends to make this quantum leap in week 2. So with Michigan last week, offensive line still in a state of flux. Davis Warren ends up getting the start at quarterback. Defense still really good, but you watch it, if you're a Michigan fan, you think to yourself, this is not going to fly against the team we're playing next week that, oh, by the way, just hung like 60-something on Colorado State. Well, there's always this progression and regression to the mean. It's like rubber bands going in different directions. So the line on this thing's around a touchdown. Texas by about a touchdown. And I guarantee you there are a lot of folks saying that Texas will run away in this thing. Well, this is where we find out, number 1, whether there is a flaw in the Texas offensive ointment. And by that, I mean, can a front like Michigan just throw the crowbar in the bicycle spokes? Can they disrupt from the interior so much? Is that injury situation at running back for Texas so dire that they don't have to sell out to stop the run, and they can let that secondary go to work, and Texas's offense bogs down, and conversely, Michigan forces them into a lot of obvious passing downs, and Quinn Ewers can't fit it in the tight window, and Michigan's defense takes over and scores. There's a world where that happens, Haley. There's also a world where Texas really just is this good, and Michigan gets humbled, and Texas pulls away, and at that point, you're starting to look at Georgia last week, what they did. If that were to happen, you look at Texas this week and what they did, and you're starting to say, wow, there was some underachievement from the second tier of the SEC in week 1, but the top tier of the SEC looks good to go.
Yeah, we'll have to see how it plays out. We had that graphic up that showed 25 straight home victories for Michigan. Sounds like that could be in jeopardy this weekend. But we want to stay in the SEC. Of course, Tennessee has a neutral site game. It's a road game, but it's also at a neutral site as they get set to take on NC State. And I love our research team, Josh, because they throw in stats like this. This is the first matchup between these two since Mike Glennon threw a career-high 4 picks against the Vols back in 2012. So obviously, I'm sure Tennessee is hoping for that on the other side there, but what are you anticipating in this matchup?
I mean, how many chapters have been written in the book of Tennessee football since 2012? I think Tennessee is going to continue to scale up and eventually become an SEC championship contender this year, if they're not already. This is one of those tightrope walks you have to make in college football. You cannot get sucked in and fooled by someone running it up on UT Chattanooga. But when you see potential greatness, you just see potential greatness. So I'm prepared to eat these words now, but I expected a lot from the guy you're looking at on the screen right now, Nico Iamaleava. I expected a lot from him. He goes into week 1. It's not the numbers, Haley, that he put up. It's UT Chattanooga. You and I would have a half-decent day against UT Chattanooga. It's what he looked like doing it. And then you go back to the spring. We were over there all day in Knoxville. We had a live show there. We had Josh Heupel on the show. And they were adamant. Doesn't matter that this guy hasn't started an entire season. You saw what he did against Iowa in the bowl game. We love him physically, like we think he's elite. But we also like who he is intangibly. And so all the boxes checked there. And then I look at the other side and I look at NC State. They were convinced they massively upgraded their receiver room, taking a step back defensively, but they were convinced we're going to be able to do that scoring really, really quick and running it up on teams sort of thing. And they looked abysmal in week 1. Now, again, just like we were talking about with Texas and Michigan, do we see that progression, regression to the mean thing? It's a tale as old as time in college football. But just like I may get fooled into laying the points with Texas, I can tell you confidently I think Tennessee's going to win and cover here. I think Tennessee is not fool's gold. They just really are that good.
That game kicking off 7:30 Eastern at Bank of America Stadium. Again, a neutral site for both of those teams. Let's talk about Oregon, Josh, because I think they had a lot of people scratching their head after their Week 1 matchup. They didn't come out storming with offensive firepower the way we expected them to. I thought the guys on the Cover 3 podcast had a good point. They said it kind of felt like Oregon was treating that as an extended scrimmage, if you will, to try and sort out what their offense is going to look like before they really get into the stretch of that Big Ten action there. But when it comes to Oregon, this week they are taking on the Mountain West favorites in Boise State. So obviously they don't have the luxury here to try and work through different rotations and whatnot. How much of an improvement do you need to see out of Oregon this week to, retain that confidence in them that they're going to be a contender this year?
Well, I hope that's true, that they were trying to figure some things out, because if it's not, they're in trouble. If it's not, they're a multiple loss team this year in the Big Ten. So I'm really high on Oregon. I'm not selling all my stock or anything like that, but the problems they had up front, just the problems they had running the ball, the problems they had on the offensive line, sometimes we see that early from a team that's going to go on to struggle, and we discount it simply because it doesn't mesh with what we expect. So if we thought Oregon was going to be terrible this year and they did exactly what they did last week, we would have looked at that same result and would say, see, told you. But since it doesn't marry our preseason notion of what that team is, we're quick to dismiss it. And that counts me. I am wanting to dismiss it. I'm just having trouble dismissing it. Now, we could be talking this time next week, and they've hung 60 themselves on Boise, and all's right with the world. But I'm telling you, Dylan Gabriel transferred there at quarterback. Dylan Gabriel, Haley, tied a program record for pass completions in a game last week, and you think, oh, that sounds great. It's not great. They didn't want to do it. They did it out of desperation. They did it because had he not had to throw the ball that much because they couldn't run it, they were in danger of losing to Idaho. And known for many things, not challenging major football programs. So this week is the quintessential get-right spot. I'm careful saying that because folks were saying it about Florida State last night, and we saw what happened there. This is a far cry from that sort of situation. But, Boise State is not the kind of program that you look at and say, oh, good, we're playing Boise this week. We'll use that game to figure some things out. So the offensive line situation, especially with the injuries they've had there, I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't a little concerned and a little alarmed by what I saw last week. Yeah, well, you have to keep in mind, Oregon 0-3 all-time against Boise State. It's most meetings without a win versus any opponent in program history. So, and I mentioned it, they're the favorites to win the Mountain West. So 10 o'clock Eastern in Eugene is going to be an interesting showdown there. Let's go from the Mountain West favorite to the Big 12 favorite. Utah opens up conference play against Baylor, and I use the air quotes because it's not going to count towards the conference record because the game was scheduled before Utah joined the Big 12, so it's really just a game. But that being said, Josh, it's kind of a tease to what you can expect out of Big 12 football, this new look Big 12 football. What's the mentality, I guess, of a game like this where you're playing a conference opponent, but it doesn't count, but it's still important? I don't know. And this time next week, we'll be talking about a perceived major conference game when Arizona goes into Kansas State on a Friday night. And then you're going to realize, oh, that's another one of these conference, non-conference games. It counts if you're of the opinion that you're a competitor. It counts no matter what. Also, if you're of the opinion, as I am, that it's not a foregone conclusion this conference just gets one team in the playoff, especially with the way the ACC is struggling mightily right now, then this matters because if you're a favorite and Utah is a favorite in this conference, resume is going to matter. So you've got that part, like the overall greater good of the highest level of the conference resume, but also we think we know everything about Utah, and there is a lot of consistency and continuity year to year with them. I have no clue who Baylor is. I have no clue what Baylor is. This has gone from, one of the most stuffy and off-the-radar programs to a program where they're running around in practice wearing T-shirts that say, we pay players. So everything's changed. Great Lone Star song from back in the 90s country days, but it's also apropos to today's college football. Everything's changed. Maybe that includes Baylor. You see with a lot of these teams, Haley, where there's desperation amongst the coaching staff, they make all these moves. And if it's Alabama or Georgia, it's all high profile. If it's Baylor, no one's following the news wire with Baylor personnel and coaching moves. But that doesn't mean they didn't make big moves. Vandy is a perfect example of that. Vandy made some really good under-the-radar moves, and then boom, they upset Virginia Tech as a double-digit dog. Well, maybe this is where Baylor makes a move and maybe they open some eyes. Maybe Utah doesn't look quite as good, maybe a notch below what you expect from them. So even though it's not a conference game, I think there's a lot to learn here.
Kicks off at 3:30 Eastern. Let's wrap up here with our first rivalry game on CBS. The Cy-Hawk Trophy is going to be handed out to either Iowa or Iowa State. Now, Josh, we had George Kittle on the show last week, and he said the reason why this game is so big is because it's really the only football you get out in Iowa. It's the one thing that everyone looks forward to here. You're not going to get a lot of points, maybe, but the defense is going to be good. It's going to be a good game here. But nonetheless, Cade McNamara made a statement last week for Iowa, put up some big points there. Iowa State, this is a big rivalry game here. What do you expect out of these in week 2?
Oh, man. Is Hassel in there? That will determine how I answer this.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm feeling good.
I tried to boost it up so that I didn't, you know, like I made sure that he was happy with that. But make us humble here.
I'm worried. Let me be honest. As a representative of the red and yellow over there, I'm worried. This is a banged-up team. They are going in there. Point spread's 2.5. You're basically laying home field at Kinnick. So odds makers are telling you these are even teams. My power ratings, for what it's worth, view them as dead even teams. But I'd be lying to you, Haley, if I said, and Hassel, Christopher there, I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a little shaky. But you know what? Hubris has taken down many a team in this rivalry, so I'd a lot rather be confident afterwards than beforehand. Hassel, this is the day and age where a lot of people make bets that they're not willing to back up on Twitter. Are you willing to make like an over-the-edge social media bet on this game?
No. I picked Iowa State to win this game preseason.
Okay.
I reconsidered this week after the injuries to Iowa State and Iowa finding an offense, but I'm still going with Iowa State to win this game because I think this is probably the second best quarterback wide receiver punch that Iowa's going to see all season behind Ohio State.
Okay. Well, there you go. Josh, you agree or disagree with Chris?
I agree now. He talked me into it.
Happiness
so if
hedge.
I lose, Hassel screwed it up. I didn't screw it up. Hassel screwed it up.
All right. Well, Josh, we know that you will be on top of all things college football as this season rolls along. For our viewers at home, make sure you're locked in to Josh Pate's College Football Show. It's a new name, but it's the same incredible content that you're going to get from Josh every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, 8 o'clock Eastern.